In this video, we're going to see another example of how to write a class in Java using BlueJ. This class that we're going to write will represent a Twitter user, so let's start by clicking the New Class button and naming our class Twitter User, with capital letters at the start of each word in the class name. I'll click OK here. I need to double click on the orange rectangle for the class to open the text editor. Let's delete this code that's generated for us to start from scratch. To declare the class, we write class followed by the name of the class, which is Twitter User, then braces for the body of the class. Again, I always recommend writing these together and then start typing between them. This way you know that the braces will always match up correctly. Our model of a Twitter user will just be simple. It will have a username and a number of followers. So that's two fields for this class. The username will be a string, and the number of followers will be an int. The syntax here to declare the field is to write the type of the field, which is string followed by the name of the field, which is username, then a semicolon. And this type of the field is int, the name of the field is followers, then a semicolon. So we've declared these two fields. Let's write a constructor for the class as well. So the constructor always has the same name as the class, that's Twitter User. Then round brackets for the parameters of the constructor and braces for the body of the constructor. Now this time, instead of taking new values for both fields, we're going to take a username, but we'll just set the number of followers to be 0 for a new account. So to set the username using this parameter for the constructor, I need to take the value of the parameter and assign it to the field. So I'll write this.username for the field equals username, that's the parameter. We take the value of the parameter and store it in the field. And then I want to set the value of followers to be 0. That's just the initial value of this field for a new Twitter user object. Now technically I don't need to write this dot here because there's no other variable named followers, so this would be unambiguous if I just wrote followers equals 0. But I think it looks a bit neater next to this dot username, which I do have to write because there is another variable named username here. These are different variables. Okay, so let's compile this class and create some objects. In the last video, I created objects by right-clicking on the class and calling the constructor via new Twitter user and then giving a username. This time, let's create the object with code. And actually, there's three things happening when we right-click on the class to create an object this way, because we don't just create the object, we also create a variable that holds a reference to the object. So to create the variable, we need to say the type of the variable and then the name of the variable. So let's say Twitter user, user. And then I write an equals, and then I call the constructor with a new keyword, so new Twitter user. And then round brackets because I'm calling a constructor and a semicolon at the end of the statement. And this constructor takes a username. So let's say that the username here is Andrew. So there's three things that are going to happen when I run this statement. The first is that we're going to call this constructor to create a new object. The second thing will be that the constructor assigns this string Andrew to the username field of the object. And then finally, we're going to store a reference to that object in the variable called user. So now that I've got this user object, I can see its fields. So user.username is Andrew, and user.followers should be 0 because we have no followers, we've just created this account. If I want to add a follower to the account, then I could say user.followers++. This operation in Java will increase the value of a variable by 1. So if I do user.followers++ with a semicolon, that's a statement. Then if I see user.followers again, that's going to be 1 now because we've increased it. If I want to decrease the number of followers, then I would write user.followers minus minus to decrease it by 1. So now user.followers should be 0. Okay, let's write some methods on this class. So rather than having getter and setter methods for both fields, let's do something different this time. I'm going to have a getter method for the username, so let's write that. The method returns a string because the username is a string. The name of the method is getUsername, and then I need round brackets and braces for the body of the method. This method takes no parameters and it's just going to return the username field. Again, I don't need this .username because there's no other variable named username that could refer to. So I've got a getter method for the username, but I'm not going to write a setter method because when you create a user account on Twitter, you can't change your username later. You also can't just decide to change your number of followers. So the only way to change your number of followers is to add a follower or remove a follower. So let's write methods to add a follower and to remove a follower. The method that adds a follower is going to take no parameters and return nothing, and all it does is increase the number of followers by 1. So this is going to be void because it returns nothing. And let's call this method add follower. This takes no parameters, and then I'll have braces for the body of the method. And what this method should do is increase the number of followers by 1. So followers plus plus and then a semicolon because that's a statement. Let's also have a method to remove a follower. So void remove follower. Round brackets for the method, braces for the method body. And then this method should remove a follower. It should decrease the number of followers by 1. So let's write followers minus minus and then a semicolon because that's a statement. So now when I compile this class again, I can create another user. So let's write Twitter user equals new Twitter user. A reminder, I have to create this again because we reset the Java virtual machine when we recompiled the class. So the old object and the old variable are gone. So I'm creating another variable called user. I'm creating another Twitter user object by calling the constructor, and I need to give a parameter to this constructor. So let's give it the value Andrew. So now my user has the username Andrew, and my user has a number of followers, which is 0 at the moment. But if I call the add follower method, then I should see, well, I need a semicolon at the end of this because it's a statement. I should see that user.followers is now 1. And if I call the remove follower method, I should see that user.followers is now 0 again. So let's add a few more methods to this class. One thing that's missing is a getFollowers method, so let's write that. Followers is an int, and then the name will be getFollowers. So this method returns an int. I need braces for the body of the method, and this will just return followers. I want 2 more methods. So we have the username, which is just Andrew for the object that we created. A Twitter user also has a handle, which is the @ symbol followed by the username. So let's write getHandle. This method takes no parameters, and it's just going to return a string, which is the handle, which is @ plus the username. So that's going to be the @ symbol followed by the user's username. And a Twitter user also has a URL. So this method is going to return a string containing the URL for that user's homepage, and that's going to be twitter.com/ that user's username. So there's another 2 methods here, one to get the handle, which returns @Andrew, and then this getURL method will return twitter.com/ Andrew. So if I compile this class again, we can use it. So again, now that I've reset the Java virtual machine by compiling the class, I need to start from scratch because this user variable is gone. So let's recreate it again. Twitter user equals new Twitter user Andrew. So now I can see the number of followers with the getFollowers method. And that's 0. And I can see the user's handle with the getHandle method. And I can see the user's URL with the getURL method. So that's another example of writing a class in Java. So notice that in this case we have getter methods but no setter methods for these fields. In this case, it doesn't make sense to change the username of a Twitter user after we've already created it, and there shouldn't be any way to change the number of followers except by 1 when someone starts following or stops following the user. So the add follower method increases the number of followers by 1 and remove follower decreases it by 1. Those are the only ways that the number of followers should change. And we've also got these getter methods for the handle and the URL. So notice that these are written very similarly to the username method, at least the way they look. The name is get handle, get URL, just like get username. But rather than returning just the value of a field, they do some simple computation to compute the handle using a different field. So instead of having a field called handle, I use the value of the username field to compute the handle rather than just returning it directly. The same for the URL. Okay. So as with the previous class, I recommend not just watching me write it, but also write this class yourself in BlueJ. Create some Twitter user objects, call their methods. If you use the right-click menu to create the object, you can also use the right-click menu on the object. So let's see an example of that. Let's call this one user2, and let's call this user Alice. So if I double-click on the object here, then I can see the values of these fields. If I right-click and call the methods, if I can add a follower, let's do that twice. And then if I double-click, I can see that the number of followers is 2. If I right-click to see get followers, then I should see a 2 here. So you can try all of this yourself in BlueJ. I recommend doing it yourself as well, not just watching me do it, because it's worth getting used to using BlueJ, writing in Java, and declaring methods, declaring fields, calling them, declaring variables, creating the objects with the new keyword, and so on. Get used to doing that yourself as well. It's highly worth it.